I still remember the sound of that door closing behind me, a sound that echoed louder than any words ever could. The cold air of the nursing home hit me as I stood there, my suitcase beside my trembling hand. My son Daniel turned to me just before leaving. His words still burn in my chest. "Mum, you'll be fine here. They'll take care of you. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I begged him to wait, to talk. But his wife, Claire, stood by the door, tapping her phone, rolling her eyes. And then Daniel muttered under his breath low, sharp, cruel, "You'll rot in here, Mum." And just like that, they were gone. When Daniel was born, I thought my world was finally complete. I was a single mother back then, working 2 jobs, saving every penny, dreaming of giving him everything I never had. I never went on vacations, never bought new clothes, never dated again after his father left. Every sacrifice I made was for him: the piano lessons he quit after 2 months, the soccer trips, the college fund I built coin by coin. I remember holding him as a child, whispering, "One day you'll understand how much I love you," but I never realized that day might never come. Days in the nursing home blurred into one another. The smell of antiseptic, the distant hum of a television, the scheduled meals. I tried to call Daniel. At first, it would ring and ring unanswered. Then, it went straight to voicemail. His number was disconnected. I felt a piece of my heart break with every failed attempt. I'd sit by the window, watching families come and go, a painful reminder of what I had lost, of the life I thought I had built. The other residents had their own stories of sorrow, but mine felt like a unique kind of betrayal. I hadn't just grown old, I had been discarded. One afternoon, a young nurse named Sarah sat with me. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile. She'd often stay after her shift, just to talk. "You speak of your son with so much love," she said one day, handing me a cup of tea. I just nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I told her about his first steps, the funny way he'd mispronounce words, the pride I felt at his graduation. Sharing these memories felt like trying to hold water in my hands, precious but slipping away. Sarah listened patiently, never judging, never rushing me. She was a small beacon of light in my dim world. Sarah encouraged me to join the art class at the home. At first, I resisted. What was the point? But she insisted, bringing me a canvas and some paints. "Just try," she urged. So I did. I started painting the things I remembered from my life before this place. The park where I used to take Daniel. The little kitchen where I'd bake his favorite cookies. The old oak tree outside our first apartment. With every brushstroke, I found a piece of myself I thought was gone forever. My paintings weren't masterpieces, but they were mine. They were filled with my memories, my love, my pain. Another resident, a retired art teacher named Mr. Henderson, noticed my work. He was a quiet man, but his eyes held a spark of life. "You have a raw talent, my dear," he told me one day, pointing to a painting of a sunset. "You paint with your heart." He taught me about color, about perspective, about how to capture emotion on canvas. The art room became my sanctuary. It was a place where I wasn't just an old woman waiting for the end. I was an artist. I was creating something new. My grief was still there, but now it had a companion. Hope, word of my art spread through the nursing home. Soon, we organized a small exhibition in the common room. I was nervous, my hands shaking as people gathered to look at my paintings. Sarah stood beside me, squeezing my hand for support. People didn't just see paintings, they saw the stories behind them. They saw a mother's unending love, her deep sacrifice, and her profound heartbreak. That day, I sold my first painting. A young woman, her eyes filled with tears, bought the one of the little park. "It reminds me of my own mother," she whispered. It wasn't about the money. It was about being seen. Then, one day, the unimaginable happened. A local news reporter visiting the home for a story on community engagement saw my exhibition. She was captivated. A week later, my story was on television. The segment was titled "The Unbroken Palette, A Mother's Love in Color." It showed my paintings, told my story of sacrifice, and ended with a shot of the empty chair I always saved by the window. I didn't watch it. It was too painful, but Sarah told me it was beautiful and powerful. A few days after the broadcast, a man I didn't recognize walked into the nursing home. He looked older, tired, with lines of regret etched on his face. He walked straight to me. It was Daniel. He stood there for a long moment, just looking at me. His eyes were redimmed. "Mom," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion. I saw the news. I didn't know." He told me that after he and Claire had left me here, their lives had unraveled. Claire left him, his business failed, and he was alone. He said that seeing my paintings, hearing my story told by a stranger, made him realize the magnitude of what he had done. He sank to his knees, his head in my lap, and he wept. He sobbed like the little boy I remembered, the one I used to hold and comfort. He apologized over and over again. "I was selfish, Mum. I was cruel. Can you ever forgive me?" For a moment, all the pain, all the lonely nights, all the silent tears came rushing back. But looking down at my son, broken and asking for a second chance, I knew what I had to do. My love for him, buried under layers of hurt, was still there. It had always been there. I placed my hand on his head. "Get up, Daniel," I said softly. My voice was stronger than I expected. "We have a lot to talk about. Forgiveness isn't a switch you can flip. It's a path you choose to walk, step by step. Our journey to healing has been long and difficult. Daniel now visits me every day. We don't always know what to say, but his presence speaks volumes. He helps me with my paintings, listens to my stories, and sometimes we just sit in silence, rebuilding the bridge he burned. My art gave me a voice when I was silenced, and in an unexpected twist of fate, it brought my son back to me. My life isn't the one I dreamed of, but it's a life filled with forgiveness, second chances, and the enduring power of a mother's love. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this journey with me. If this story touched you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content. Your support means the world. Until next time. When Daniel met Claire, he was just glowing with happiness. She was everything he'd ever dreamed of, beautiful, confident, and from a world of money and privilege, a life he had always admired from afar. At first, I was thrilled for him. Every mother wants her child to find love, stability, and build their own family. But it wasn't long before I started noticing the small things, the little shifts in the air whenever I was around. She would flinch, just slightly. Whenever I'd call Daniel my boy, a subtle frown would cross her face if I offered to bring over my homemade soup, the one he'd loved since he was a child. I remember one dinner, she looked at me with a tight, polite smile and said, "Daniel's not a child anymore, you know." The words were quiet, but they hit me like a gong. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just losing a piece of my son to his new life. I was being actively replaced. After they got married, the phone calls became less frequent, the visits shorter and more strained. Whenever they did come over, it felt like Claire was always watching the clock, ready with an excuse to leave. It was always a meeting she couldn't miss, a sudden headache, or a forgotten appointment. The distance grew, not in miles, but in the silence between us. Then came the fall. It was one of those bitterly cold, icy mornings. I was just outside hanging laundry, a simple daily chore, when my foot slipped on a patch of ice on the porch step. The sound of my hip cracking was sharp, and the pain felt like a bolt of lightning shooting through me. I screamed for help, but the street was empty. No one came. After 3 surgeries, I was left with a permanent limp, a cane as my constant companion, and the humbling struggle of trying to care for myself. The simplest tasks became monumental challenges. I finally gathered the courage to ask Daniel if he and Claire could possibly visit more often, just to help with a few things. His voice on the phone was sharp, impatient. "Mum, we have our own lives. You can't expect us to drop everything for you." A week later, he brought up the idea of a nursing home. He presented it like it was some kind of generous gift, a temporary solution. "Just for a while, Mum," he said, his voice softer now, almost convincing. "Just until you're stronger." But as I packed a small bag, a cold dread settled in my stomach. I had a feeling that once I walked through those doors, there would be no plan for me to ever leave. The day he left me there is burned into my memory. The nursing home had a sterile smell, a mixture of bleach and a quiet, lingering sadness. A nurse greeted us with a polite, practiced smile, but her eyes were tired. They were the eyes of someone who had seen far too many abandoned mothers, just like me. Daniel carried my small suitcase into the room and then just stood there, awkwardly shifting his weight by the door. Claire didn't even come in. She stayed in the hallway, impatiently scrolling through her phone. I reached for his hand, my own trembling. "Danny, please," I begged. "I don't belong here. Please take me home. I promise I'll manage somehow." He pulled his hand away gently, but it felt like a slap. He looked almost embarrassed. "Mum, this is what's best for you," he said, avoiding my eyes. "You'll get good care here." I couldn't stop the tears from streaming down my face. He glanced away, unable to look at me, and muttered words that would haunt me forever. "You'll rot in here if you keep clinging to the past." Then he turned and walked out. He didn't look back. That was the last time I saw his face for months. The days began to blur into one another, marked only by the changing light outside my window. The quiet years, I call them. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I would just sit by the window, a silent observer of the world outside. I watched the snow melt into spring rain and the rain give way to blossoms, but my door remained closed. No one came to visit. I'd see other residents with their families. Grandchildren would arrive with bright bouquets of flowers, their laughter echoing down the halls. Sons would sit with their mothers, holding their hands, just being present. But my phone stayed silent. My room stayed empty. Sometimes I'd overhear the staff whispering as they passed my door. "She's the one," they'd say in hushed tones. "The one whose son left her for good." I learned to smile when I heard them. Crying had become too exhausting, and a smile was the only armor I had left. Then one afternoon, a fellow resident showed me a picture on her tablet. It was them, Daniel and Claire. They were on a beautiful, sun-drenched beach in Greece, wearing sunglasses, holding colorful cocktails, and smiling for the camera. The caption under the photo read, "Finally, some peace and relaxation after all the stress." And in that moment, staring at their carefree smiles, something inside me didn't break. It hardened. My son, my Danny, had traded his mother for a life of luxury and convenience. He saw me as a burden, a problem to be solved and forgotten. The pain was immense, but underneath it, a new feeling began to stir. It was a quiet, unyielding resolve. I had survived the fall, the surgeries, the heartbreak. I would survive this, too. Not for him, not for anyone else, but for myself. My story wasn't over. It was just the beginning of a new, unexpected chapter. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It means the world to know I'm not alone. My photo, a framed picture of us from a happier time, sat on my bedside table, gathering dust. It was a constant, silent reminder of what I had lost. That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence of the nursing home was deafening, filled only by the ticking clock and the echo of my son's words. I took out a piece of paper and a pen, the kind the home provides, and I began to write. I poured my heart onto that page, 20 years of love, of sleepless nights worrying about fevers and scraped knees. of pride at graduations, and the deep aching pain of this final abandonment. I wrote, "You said I'd rot here. But my dear son, I think I already started rotting the day I realized you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as just a burden." I folded the paper, tear stains blurring the ink. I never sent that letter. It stayed tucked away in my drawer, a confession only the moon ever heard me whisper through the window. It was nearly a year later when a young nurse named Emily joined the staff. She had kind eyes that didn't just look at you, but saw you. She often sat with me during her breaks, sharing stories about her own family. One sunny afternoon, she asked gently, "Do you have family, Mrs. Lewis?" I hesitated, the word catching in my throat. I finally managed to say, the past tense hanging heavy in the air between us. A few weeks later, she approached me, her expression a mix of excitement and caution. "Mrs. Lewis, I saw your son on social media," she said, holding out her phone. "A friend of a friend posted a picture. It says he's back in town." My heart, which had felt so still for so long, skipped a beat. Hope, a dangerous and forgotten feeling, flickered within me. I watched the door every day, but he never came. Months passed before I heard what happened, not from him, but through the quiet whispers of the grapevine that connect all small towns. Daniel and Claire's perfect life, their dream built on sandy shores and sunny skies, had fallen apart. He lost his job after some kind of financial scandal at his firm. Their expensive lifestyle, the fancy cars and dinners, crumbled overnight. They had to sell their beautiful house, their so-called friends, the ones who had clapped him on the back and admired his success, disappeared like ghosts. And when Daniel, desperate and broken, reached out to everyone for help, no one answered, except me. Even after all the pain, after all the silent nights and unsent letters, I answered his call when it finally came. His voice was trembling, stripped of all its old confidence. "Mum," he choked out, "I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." When Daniel walked into the nursing home again, he looked nothing like the confident, self-assured man who had left me behind. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes were hollow, and streaks of grey had appeared in his hair. He looked defeated. He sat beside me in the same chair he'd occupied during that last terrible visit, but this time his head was bowed in shame. He couldn't meet my eyes. "I was angry," he finally whispered, his voice raspy. "I was so scared. I didn't want to see you weak because it reminded me how powerless I was to fix it." "To fix you?" He took a shaky breath. "Claire," she said, "it would be easier if we just moved on, if we started fresh." And I listened to her. I was a coward, Mum. I listened. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to share a story with you that's very close to my heart. It's a story about family, loss, and the long winding road to forgiveness. It begins in a place I once thought was the end of my world, a quiet room in a nursing home. For years, silence was my only companion after my son, Daniel, left me here. He was my whole world, the little boy whose hand I held, whose scraped knees I bandaged. But he grew up, met a woman named Claire, and suddenly I became a burden. The last time I saw him before he vanished from my life. His words echoed in the sterile hallway. "You'll rot here." He said it with such coldness. The son I had raised was gone, replaced by a stranger. Life in the nursing home was a blur of quiet days and long nights. I made friends, of course. There was Eleanor, with her endless stories of a life lived on the stage, and Mr. Henderson, who taught me how to play chess. They became my family. We shared meals, memories, and the quiet understanding that comes with reaching the later chapters of life. I learned to find joy in small things. The warmth of the sun on my face in the garden, the taste of a perfectly brewed cup of tea, the shared laughter over a silly joke. I was surviving. More than that, I was slowly learning to live again without the son, who was my everything. Then, one day, the unimaginable happened. A nurse came to my room, her expression soft with pity. "You have a visitor," she said gently. And there he was, Daniel. He looked broken. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by worn-out clothes. His face was etched with lines of exhaustion and regret I'd never seen before. He was a ghost of the confident, cruel man who had left me here. He stumbled through an apology, his voice cracking. He told me how Claire had spent all his money, how his business had failed, how he had lost everything. He had hit rock bottom, and in the darkness he finally remembered me. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, and confessed that he had come back not out of love, but because he had nowhere else to go. The honesty was brutal, but it was a start. I listened, my heart a tangle of old wounds and a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. I stayed silent for a long, long time, letting his words hang in the air between us. The room was still, the only sound our breathing. Then I spoke, my voice softer than I expected. "You told me I'd rot here, Daniel, but it seems it was you who decayed from the inside out." Tears started rolling down his face, silent at first, then turning into quiet sobs that shook his whole body. He whispered, his voice choked with emotion, "Can you ever forgive me?" In that moment, I saw not the man who abandoned me, but the terrified little boy who used to run to me for comfort. I reached out and took his hand. It felt familiar, the same hand that once fit so perfectly in mine when he was a child, the hand I guided as he took his first steps. "I already did, Daniel," I said softly. "I forgave you the moment you left. Because I had to survive. Holding on to that anger would have been like drinking poison and waiting for him to suffer. Forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. It was the key that unlocked my own prison. After that day, things began to change, slowly. Daniel started visiting again. Not every week, but enough. He'd bring me flowers from the market, simple bouquets that brightened my room. Sometimes we'd just sit in silence, the quiet no longer heavy with resentment, but filled with a fragile, unspoken understanding. We were learning to be in the same space again. He told me he and Claire had divorced. She left him for another man as soon as the money ran out. I felt a strange sense of detachment, not satisfaction or pity. It was just a fact, a chapter closing in his life. It made me think that maybe karma doesn't always come fast, with a loud clap of thunder. Sometimes it just quietly finds its way home. One sunny afternoon, as we sat by the window watching the golden light pour across the garden, Daniel turned to me. He asked if I wanted to move back in with him, to leave this place behind. He had found a small apartment and was getting back on his feet. The offer hung in the air, a bridge back to a life I once knew. I looked out at the garden I had come to love, at the familiar faces of the nurses and my friends. I smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. "No, Daniel," I said gently. "This is my home now. I've built a life here, but you can visit as often as you like." He nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. But this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of understanding, of acceptance. And for the first time in so many years, I saw my son again. Not the man who abandoned me, but the boy I once raised with all the love in my heart. He was finally home, and so was I. This journey taught me that peace isn't something you find when circumstances change. It's something you build, brick by brick, within your own heart. It's about choosing forgiveness, not because others deserve it, but because you deserve to be free. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. If it resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Take care and remember to be kind to yourselves. That night, I sat by the window, the soft glow of the street lamp casting long shadows across the room. In my hands, I held an old letter, its edges softened by time and touch. This was the one I never sent, the one filled with all the words I couldn't say, all the hurt I couldn't express. For years, it had been a heavy secret, a tangible piece of my pain. I read it one last time, the ink a faded testament to a storm that had raged within me. Each sentence was a memory, a sharp sting of a past conversation. "You'll just rot here," he had said. The words had echoed in the quiet corners of my heart for so long, a cruel prophecy I feared might come true. They had planted a seed of doubt, a feeling of being left behind, of being small. I remember the days that followed his departure. The house felt too big, the silence too loud. I'd walk past his empty room, a place that once echoed with laughter and late-night talks, and a wave of cold would wash over me. It wasn't just sadness, it was a profound sense of failure. Had I done something wrong? Was I not enough? The questions circled endlessly, each one a thorn in my side. In those early days, I replayed every argument, every misunderstanding. I tried to pinpoint the exact moment things went wrong, the fracture that grew into a chasm between us. I thought if I could just understand it, I could fix it. But some things aren't meant to be fixed. They are meant to be understood and eventually released. That letter in my hand was my attempt to fight back, to explain my side, to demand an apology. It was filled with a righteous anger that burned hot and bright. I wanted him to know the depth of the wound he had inflicted. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the pain I carried. Revenge, I thought, would be the only bomb. But as the years passed, something shifted. The sharp edges of the pain began to dull. The silence in the house started to feel less like emptiness and more like peace. I started filling the quiet not with sorrow, but with myself. I rediscovered old hobbies, planted a garden, and reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with. The world I had built for him, I started rebuilding for me. Slowly, I realized that holding on to that anger was like holding onto a hot coal. The only person it was burning was me. I was keeping myself a prisoner of a past I couldn't change, waiting for an apology that might never come. And for what? To prove a point. To win a battle that had no winners. So tonight, sitting by this window, I looked at the letter not with anger, but with a strange kind of pity for the woman who wrote it. She was so lost, so hurt, she didn't know the strength she had within her. She didn't know that she didn't need his validation to be whole. With a deep breath that felt like it came from the very bottom of my soul, I began to tear the letter. First in half, then into quarters, the sound of ripping paper a soft, satisfying percussion in the quiet room. Each tear felt like breaking a chain. I tore it into smaller and smaller pieces until the words were just a confetti of forgotten pain. Then I let them fall like snowflakes into the trash can beside me. It was done, because some wounds I now understand don't need revenge. They don't need confrontation or a dramatic showdown. They just need release. They need you to decide that your peace is more important than their apology. Maybe he was right in a way. Maybe a part of me did rot here, the part of me that was defined by his approval, the part that felt incomplete without him, that part had to wither away. It had to die to make room for something new. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't see, was what grew from that decay. From the ashes of that old pain, I cultivated something else entirely. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was a quiet, sturdy garden of my own making. I grew peace, the kind that settles deep in your bones and isn't shaken by the storms of others. I grew strength, the kind that comes from knowing you can survive your own heartbreaking and come out kinder on the other side. And most surprisingly, I grew forgiveness. Not for him, not really, but for myself. Forgiveness for holding on for so long. As I climbed into bed, the room no longer felt empty. It felt full. Full of my own presence, my own breath. I pulled the covers up, a sense of lightness washing over me, a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been missing for so long. And as I drifted off to sleep, I whispered into the quiet air a promise to myself. I'm free now, truly free. It's a strange thing, isn't it? Sometimes children forget who held their hand when they learned to walk, who wiped their tears when they fell, who stayed up all night when they were sick. They forget who held them when no one else would. They get caught up in their own lives, their own ambitions. And the person who was their entire world becomes a distant memory, a footnote in their story. But life has a funny way of reminding them. It's not through angry phone calls or guilt trips. It's not through grand dramatic gestures of a mother's suffering. It's through time. It's through the quiet, unyielding passage of days and years. It's in the moments they find themselves needing a comfort they can't quite name, a wisdom they took for granted. Because a mother's love doesn't just vanish when it's unappreciated. It doesn't scream for attention or demand reciprocity. It just learns to live without applause. It continues to exist, a steady, quiet light, whether anyone is looking at it or not. It becomes a love that is self-sustaining, a love that finds its purpose not in being received, but simply in being. And in that quiet existence, it finds its own profound and unshakable peace. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this moment with me. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories from the heart. Your presence here means the world.